Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Morehouse College Chapel Assistance Program. Tonight, we are in for a phenomenal presentation and discussion with Dr. Nathaniel Norman Jr. I hope that you all are well. I hope that you all are good. I'm going to read his bio shortly. Dr. Nathaniel Norman Jr. is a professor in the Department of English at Morehouse College. He is Professor Emeritus, Department of English at the City College of New York and the Department of African American Studies at Temple University. He is a former chair and graduate director of African American Studies at Temple University, where he taught undergraduate and graduate courses in African American Studies, African American Literature and Culture. His publications include African American Studies, the Discipline, and its dimensions in 2019. The African American Studies Reader 2001-2007, Readings in African American Language, Aspects, Features, and Perspectives, Volume 1, 2003, and Volume 2, 2005. The Adonis Gale Jr. Reader of 2009, The Fields and the Functions of African American Studies and Public Policy, 2009. He has articles published in College Language, the Association Journal, the Journal of Basic Writing, the Journal of Chinese Language Teachers Association, the Journal of Black Studies, and Language Quarterly. Norman earned his BS at Ball State University, an MS at St. Francis University, and a PhD at Fordham University. He is a man that has many awards, a man of great knowledge, and I hope that tonight we can jump into his presentation, that we can all pull from his knowledge. And without further ado, I introduce to all of you Dr. Nathaniel Norman Jr.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you. Tonight, I want to maybe focus on three areas of writing. Number one, in terms of the different types of writing that we use in everyday life, and also academic writing that we use in the university. The second area I want to focus on is writing as resistance, as relates to the newspapers, Black newspapers, and letters that have been written over years to protest our condition in terms of America. And I want to end with a description and narrative about the Black Ink Project at Morehouse. To begin, writing is a social linguistic process. That is, that occurs in the mind. It occurs about thinking. And that writing also is a production of written language, which makes it exact, as we say, that you can revise it, you can revise it again until you get it to the point of what you want your writing to convey to the reader. Also, it is a very individual, solitary task or act that in the process of writing, oftentimes we sit alone and construct our writing. Also, in terms of there's a connection more with our ego with writing. Oftentimes people say to us, you can't read well, and we, overlook that in some ways. But when someone say you can't write well, it's connected to our ego, and we seem more offended by that. At Morehouse and at other universities, there's different types of writing that are used. The whole process of writing, making use of different methods and techniques for teaching writing. There's basically 3 stages in the writing process. The idea of pre-writing, in which we do brainstorming and gathering information. And then there's the process of writing the particular assignment. And thirdly, and this is how we improve our writing, is revising and rewriting our particular essay. The second type of writing are personal narratives, in terms that we write about ourselves. Oftentimes we keep journals or keep diaries. We write autobiographical information about ourselves. Personal narratives are very personal in terms of we are writing about ourselves. We are writing about our life experiences and life situations. A third type of writing, another type of writing, is writing as catharsis or writing as healing. Oftentimes in terms of, if you're familiar with Mr. Baldwin, he suggests that writing puts us in touch with our consciousness, puts us in touch with the challenges that we face. And oftentimes through writing and putting in words, we are able to go through a process of healing and transformation. Another type of writing is writing as a social act, or now there's this discussion about writing and social justice. That is demanding through writing, protesting what's happening to Black people in the United States and throughout history. You know, in terms of many instances of writing as social acts appear in blogs, appear in Twitter, and appear on Facebook. It's a writing of sharing everyday events and situations and experiences we have. And the other point is writing as inquiry. The act of writing itself is a way of thinking and knowing, to ask ourselves questions, to inquire about sources and evidence, to collect data, to evaluate data, through comparison and contrast, infer similarities and differences, explain evidence of support about a particular claim or something as a hypothetical conclusion to an idea that we have. Writing is also thinking. Writing facilitates thinking. Writing improves the thinking process and contributes to development and critical thinking. Because individual, presenting your arguments in ways of cultivating a higher order of thinking. And writing develops critical thinking skills. It enables you to present your ideas and your opinions and positions on particular topics. There's another type of writing, again, writing to learn. The pedagogical approaches that we use in methods of learning. Like I said, writing helps a student clarify ideas, and you become comfortable with your writing, and you can improve upon your writing skills by completing assignments, be they short, informal, or performed in and out of class. Writing in your journals, writing response papers, writing analysis, writing lab reports are activities that help you think through key concepts and ideas and languages of your particular discipline. The idea of writing in disciplines, each academic discipline has a style of writing, has a structure of writing, has word choices, has methods of assessing and examining a particular discipline. Okay. And another type of writing is writing as an act of resistance. And basically, there have been 4 time periods where Blacks have experienced in America. 1, enslavement. 2, segregation. 3, the era segregation and Jim Crow. The era of lynching, and the civil rights era. And during each of these times, Black folks have struggled and protested through various means. And one of the most effective methods of protest and resistance is writing and of writings. Writing has long been regarded as an act of overt or covert resistance in which writers have questioned and challenged those in power about injustice, homophobia, lynching, inequality, racism, religion, slavery, segregation, migration, police brutality, feminism, voter suppression, and other forms of oppression. Written acts of resistance have utilized a variety of genres, ranging from essays, letters, newspapers, pamphlets, novels, biographies, poetry, lyrics of songs. Some written acts of resistance have been had to disguise their intentions in order not to be persecuted. As you remember, that probably the first form of resistance by our ancestors was to learn to read and write, because it was against the law for our ancestors to be taught to read or to write. So really, in terms of writing as resistance, it really began with our ancestor resisting the idea and learning to write and read on their own. Okay. Now, the earliest form of resistance literature, David Walker's Appeal in 1829. And the idea was to instill pride and implore the Black community to take actions against slavery and discrimination. The next one was Frederick Douglass. What to Slaves is the 4th of July, 1852. And this is a speech that explores the constitutional and value-based arguments against the continuation of slavery in the United States. He protested the merciless exploitation and cruelty and torture that slaves are subjected to in the United States. He was pointing out the hypocrisy of the Constitution in the United States, speaking of values of freedom and so forth, yet our ancestors were enslaved. During the Harlem Renaissance, the Black protest literature, and one of the most famous one is by Claude McKay, If We Must Die. The idea, if we are going to have to die, we should resist the oppressor violently and bravely like he attacks us. And if we die in the struggle, responding to the attacks upon African American. And this was a commentary on the Red Summer of 1918 in Chicago, especially when many Blacks were killed throughout the country. Maya Angelou, I Know Why the Cage Bird Sings, speaks of oppression against Blacks and her portrayal of using a free bird and cage bird, in ways talk about the abolishment of slavery and how we should be free and how we should demand freedom in terms of protest. Mr. Baldwin with The Fire Next Time, the idea of the civil rights movement, to examine the consequences of racial injustice against Black people, and that Black and white should attack the legacy of racism. And the next would be Native Son, Richard Wright, 1940. It's a sociological study or literary social study of Blacks' conditions, especially in Chicago, representative of the unequal treatment and the conditions of Black people in urban ghettos in America. It was a form of protest. It was the first book that was the Book of the Month Club, and it was eventually made into a movie to protest during that time what was happening with Black people. And then Black newspapers played a great part. At one time, there was over 300 Black newspapers. And through newspaper, this is how our many of our ancestors were taught to read, through newspaper and through the Bible. And the first newspaper was again founded by Frederick Douglass, called the North Star, and it was a protest, writing to protest and resistance against slavery. One of the other newspapers that still exists today is the Amsterdam News. and it was supportive of Dr. King during the civil rights movement, emergence of Malcolm X and the Nation of Islam in the 1970s. Dr. King's letter from a Birmingham jail can be viewed as protest. He was protesting the idea that Black people should be patient and not be steadfast to move ahead. So he was writing to fellow clergymen saying that, we can't wait, basically, and that the time was now for us to have our freedom. And it is a form of protest writing, protest in terms of protesting the conditions of Black people experiencing in America. During the 1960s, if you're familiar with the Black Panthers' 10-point plan, demanding certain things for Black people, full employment, control of the Black community, adequate housing, adequate health care, in some ways reparation. Through their newspapers, there was protests throughout the 60s and so forth. The contemporary, Black Lives Matter is another form of protest, basically in terms of physical marches and so forth, but their platform and their demands are in ways writing, in terms of protest. In the war on Black people, reparation, disinvestment from institutions that criminalize, engage, and harm Black people, economic justice, community control of laws and institutions of police, and an independent Black political party and self-determination in all areas of society. Now, final thoughts on this. Writings and writers can engage and amplify the voices of the oppressed and unheard. Various forms of writings can change minds, morals, and hearts of individuals, a community, and a country. Personal narrative writings can be healing. Writings can be a political act to respond to oppression, expose fraud. Writing shapes and influences thought and thinking. Writing transmits cultural norms and values of a people. The content and themes of Black protest writing today are about police brutality, criminal justice reform, LGBTQ rights, systematic racism, racial discrimination, and inequities, reparation, voters suppression, and white supremacists. Still, I believe that the choices we make about what to write and through what mediums of communication we use to tell our stories and how we claim our power. African American writers have long shared the goal of improving our lives and combating injustice and expressing indignity about the plight of Black folks. Now, the last, but I guess the most important thing I want to discuss with you is the Black Ink Project at Morehouse College. This is a writing program, a writing initiative to enhance and improve the writing skills of Morehouse men. It has basically 4 components. We are attempting to, through English Composition 101 and 102, the first year experience, general education, writing in the disciplines, to incorporate Black life and history and culture throughout the curriculum, throughout all writing that's done at Morehouse that incorporate Black life, history, and culture. There are 4 major goals of it. Number 1 is to provide students with opportunities to engage in writing activity and improve their written communication skill throughout their matriculation at Morehouse. Number 2 is to facilitate students' exploration in the selections of writing topics relating to Black life, history, and culture in the first year writing experience, general ed, and discipline-specific courses. The third is to develop opportunities for our faculty present them with strategy and techniques for teaching writing and improving the students' writing and use of the Black life history and topics. And the last goal is to create and position Morehouse to be the clearinghouse for research on writing for teaching Black males in terms of writing in disciplines, teaching Black males writing in STEM, teaching Black students, males writing in all area of the writing process, particularly making use of culturally relevant topics and culturally relevant materials in developing the writing process. Thank you.
Yes, sir. I just took a lot of information from you. I have my notepad here taking notes. And so we're just going to jump into it. I have a few questions for you. And, we're just going to flow as we go. One, I was going to say thank you for that great presentation. So I guess my first question to you would be, what does writing look like for you as you're getting ready to write a piece or you're getting ready to put together something? How do you bring all your thoughts together? How do you develop a piece of writing?
Like I said, the first stage is to understand what I want to write about, the topic. And when I'm saying ask myself question, what I call brainstorming. Ask what I think about the topic. Do I agree with the topic? What I know about the topic already? What I want to research on the topic? And there's a whole process of gathering information. You can do that in terms of research in class. If we have a class that everyone is engaged, we can glean points of views and information from our classmates. So being in the process, each one of us, thank you for it, has a strategy or techniques for writing. Some people make notes, take word notes and outline. Some people just write a first draft and revise that. So each one of us has a strategy or technique or process for writing. And if you know yours, you comfortable with yours, you're going to be a better writer.
Yes, sir. As you were reading your final thoughts, I had seen that you had said that writing can sometimes change minds, morals, and hearts of individuals, a community, or a country. Have you ever found yourself having one set of views, and after reading something and maybe writing something, your mind had changed about a certain view? If so, could you give us an example of how your mind changed and maybe why it changed after reading or seeing something?
10 times. And so I taught a special topics on Baldwin 2 springs ago. And in it, he talks about that whole notion of the Jesus and the God who failed us, and that really Black people need our own Black Jesus or our own Black God, because the one that we have been, quote, worshiping has failed us in many ways. Wow. So I'm also a student of the 60s with James Cone in terms of Black liberation theology. So reading at this time, it made me sort of want to reaffirm that, if there were such a person as Jesus, he looked like us, he looked like me, and that's the type of what would be happening if we got the world falling to their knees, praying to a Black Jesus, asking for forgiveness, asking for grace, and so forth. So that, changed me in some ways, that to help me think about, in terms of the power of what Baldwin was saying, that, hey, we need our own Jesus in some ways.
Yes, sir. And I like that. I really do. I guess my next question would be to you, is we all find ourselves sometimes facing some tough, challenging times. And also you said that readings and writings can sometimes be a healing tool. I know that, especially, this past year and this year has been kind of difficult. So what are some things that you have read or have written that have healed and that have healed your soul, for example, or something that has healed you in the midst of whatever you were facing?
But two things. Being at Morehouse, you have to read Howard Thurman, right? And you have to read Dr. King. And the whole idea of love, spirituality, love of self, respecting self, getting in touch with your spiritual self. And so rereading Thurman this year and rereading Dr. King's collections of essays, Testament, right? That has helped me survive this whole period in terms of the COVID epidemic. One thing that I took away from this slide presentation is the lyrics of songs. And if you're familiar with the Black Power and Black Consciousness movement, the songs by Curtis Mayfield, the songs by Nina Simone, James Brown, Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud, or Nina Simone's To Be Young, Gifted, and Black. Songs, to some extent, are empowering. We can view those as lyrics and writings that empower us. So yes, the readings, the songs, and so forth, sort of heals, right? There's a song by John Lee Hooker called The Blues is Healing. Writing can also be healing to some extent.
Okay. I want to ask you, I guess, a more personal question. As you're getting ready to read or write something, what are some things that you do? Do you sit outside and read and write? Do you listen to any jazz while you read and write? What are some things that prepares your mind to get in that read and writing state that you can give to our audience?
Wow, thank you. When you say sitting out in the park, before Starbucks closed, I got more working to think there, even with the coming and going. But when I have an idea, I just start reading. And the idea of, of the liberal education is that, if you have an idea or topic, within certain disciplines, ideas in psych and social are related. Ideas in literature and history are related. So any idea or topic I want to write about, I start researching and start collecting notes, collecting articles. One important thing is when you're doing research, make sure you record where you got the information from. That's an important part. So I began to brainstorm and began to research. I have to write a draft first. I don't write outlines. I don't write word outlines or sentences. I have to write a first draft in this form. And then maybe a second draft or a third draft. My wife is my worst critic, so I have her read it, right? And she'll tell me this doesn't make sense or you didn't do this. And so I rewrite it and do it again. So it is a process. And the whole research process can take you to books, scholarly articles, much in terms of on the web now. But in terms of the type of writing that I do, basically, you have to research. You mentioned the book, African American Studies, the discipline in its dimension. I worked on that for 15 years, learning about each of the 16 disciplines that exist in higher education. So it was like 16 years, 15 years of research, writing 8 to 10 different drafts of it. It all depends on what the project is or what the writing task is. Depends on how much research you do and how much time you take to do it.
Okay. What are some challenges that you have found in writing, and how have you overcame those challenges? What did you do, I guess, differently in your next writing, if I could ask that?
Well, wow. And Mr. Baldwin says this, and there's a man named Addison Gale says this, and Baraka says this. Even though you have produced writings, there's still this question, I don't want to say self-doubt, this question of, is it good enough? Is it good enough to disseminate? And that's the thing that you ask, at least I ask, hey, is this good enough to disseminate? When it came to writing, I asked myself, do I want to present this framework or structure of Black students writing? And it took me a couple of years before I would write anything or release anything about Black students writing, because I didn't want to be incorrect or wrong. Even though I read thousands of essays about Black students writing, I just didn't feel like I wanted to put it out there. And so from my colleagues and from my dissertation advisor, I put it out there, right? So this self-doubt, you at least I do, when I'm writing something, the sense of, hey, is this good enough? We're always trying to make things better in some ways. And the thing is, when you write one thing, you learn more skills. It becomes easier, not that it becomes easier, but in terms of more, and you can enter a project with a little bit more confidence once you completed the other one. But that whole thing of self-doubt, is it good enough? And I still have that feeling.
Okay, and I guess I want to elaborate on that. Sometimes we as young people, not even young people, but anybody, that self-doubt thing is a really big deal. And I know, like, sometimes, if I find myself I can be writing something, I'll be like, that's not good. There's something deeper. So how do you get into the deeper Dr. Norman? How do you connect with your inner self to bring out the deeper sense of your writings?
Wow. You mentioned music. So all depends on mood. Sometimes I binge on Miles. Sometimes I binge on The Temptation. Sometimes I binge on Tina Marie or some forth. So in terms of my particular state of mind at the time, right? Like doing this, the music has healed me. Being able to read things that I hadn't read in a long time. Most of our readings as professors is preparing for our class. So being able to read a little more, even though we're as busy now as we were face to face, being able to read some of the recent things that come out. There's a collection of Ralph Ellison letters. There's a new biography on Bayard Rustin. So the idea is that you read to inform. And so that's what, in terms of getting in touch with myself, I mentioned Howard Thurman. I'm not so much a spiritual person. Talking to students, who are philosophy major or religion major. I have a former student and colleague, Dr. Bright, who teaches at Clark, and Dr. Carr, who teaches at Howard, that we're always engaging in talking about, what we do, why we do it, and how we can do it better. And especially in terms of spiritual work that we all have to do, and sometimes you ask the question, why are we here? What's the purpose of that? So that in some ways, yes. And also some of the life experiences that we have, the COVID, I've lost 2 family members during this. And so that has caused me to reflect. I have many colleagues over the years that have been, transitioned to some extent. So those things at my age makes me reflect about the importance of life, the importance of doing good or good work, as John Lewis mentioned. So those things that we reflect on, that whole thing of reflecting each day of what's happening to people, reflecting each day as to what we can do, how we can empower others, how we can show love towards others. Those are the things that, keep me going to some extent. And that responsibility we have to teach young people. And being at Morehouse, this responsibility to educating Black males, facilitating their growth and development into being responsible leaders in terms of the world. That's what, challenge every day that I go through.
Okay.
And you
Okay.
wonder if you're doing, a good job or not.
Right. I guess I want to ask now. What I seen a question from someone on Facebook. They asked, "What is your writing discipline? Are you a morning type of person? Are you a night type of person? And how often do you read or write?"
I'm a late person. Times realize that it's 4 o'clock in the morning. Um, how I write, like I said, I usually have about 3 projects that I'm working on. Okay. And so I work on one to research, and not that I procrastinate, but I get an idea to work on the second one. So just like when I'm reading, I'm reading 3 or 4 different works. And when I'm writing and research, I'm doing 2 or 3 papers. One paper I'm working on is the discourse feature of African American males. Another one is creating a rubric in terms of African-centered rhetoric. So I'm working on 3 different projects at the same time, back and forth, right? Sometimes people say that's procrastination and what takes so long, but that's my writing style and my research style. To have 2 or 3 projects that you're working on.
Okay, I know. Like for a person like me, I know that multiple projects can sometimes be good because it allows you to develop your brain a lot more. And sometimes what I find myself doing is I go out, like I'm an outdoors type guy, and so I like going outside to read and write. And so I remember when you were saying that you have to find your comfort place, and so you said Starbucks is one of your comfort places where you can
Yes.
elaborate, where you can freely think and write. And so I guess my next question to you is: I see you have a lot of books behind you. I know you mentioned Howard Thurman and Martin Luther King, but what is one reading that you probably have read over time that's maybe one of your favorite books of all times that you read maybe more than once? What are one of your favorite books?
That I've read probably 15, 20 times and taught, Sulu by Toni Morrison.
Okay, I'm gonna have to check. I'm gonna have to check that book out.
Okay.
I guess want to as we wrap up here, I want to ask you for anyone that's watching this, maybe like a new to writing that maybe thinks that writing isn't their thing. What piece of advice would you give to that beginner writer or that person who has their back against the fence about writing? That sometimes say, okay, I can't do this. My thoughts are coming out. What is one thing that you would encourage that writer maybe to do or to inspire them?
As an initial response, without thinking about it, everyone has an iPhone now, and it has a recorder on it. So talk into it, talk it out. Talk out your ideas, and then put them in written text. That's help get you started. Like I said, each one of us has a strategy for writing. So if you're stuck in some ways, quote, let's talk it out. This whole idea of talking to yourself, and answer yourself in some ways. Verbalize your thoughts in your writing.
Okay, and I guess now I just want to first of all just say thank you. Is there a way for someone like myself, if I wanted to if I'm writing something, I don't know if you're available to maybe walk someone through something, or I know we're not on campus, so we can't pop in and say, hey, Dr. Norman, what are your thoughts or ideologies or views on this certain piece? Is there a way that if someone finds themselves maybe alone, don't really have anyone to reach out to, is there something that they can walk themselves through or maneuver themselves through if they get stuck in a piece of writing or book or something like that? Is there something that you would tell them to do if they're by themselves?
Yes, if a person is a Morehouse student, he can register for our writing lab. We have some outstanding tutors. There's a WC Online. If you go to the Morehouse website, you can register and make online appointments. If someone, I get many, many emails, and I can't, help, everyone that I get because of my classes and other stuff. But as an initial contact and response, email me. And if I can't help you in the moment, I will refer you to someone who can help you. But yes, reach out to me. I'll respond to you. May not be able to give you detailed feedback, but I will help and connect you with someone who will.
Okay, Dr. Norman. One more thing, more about the Black Ink Project. Can we dive into that really quickly? I know you presented it in your presentation, but for those who are watching, could you tell us the benefit of that project and the benefit of going to the writing lab and getting your work critiqued or looked over?
Okay. The benefit of the Black Ink Project, the goal is to improve and enhance the writing abilities of Morehouse men during their tenure at Morehouse. And the idea to introduce them to Black life, history, and culture, and the idea that knowledge of culture, knowledge of history inform our writings. And there's research in terms of culturally relevant pedagogy, culturally relevant teaching, culturally relevant materials, and how that enhances and improves the written production of students, the development of students' writing, and engaging them in writing about topics. The Black Ink Project is across the curriculum, like I said, in all disciplines. When we first rolled out in fall of 2018, students were involved, SGA was involved, staff was involved, and the idea was to spread the word throughout the campus of what we're about. The Writing Center is set up to help students from all disciplines in their writing. You can have one-on-one tutoring, face-to-face through Blackboard, and you can make as many appointments as you want. Many faculty, more and more faculty now are beginning to refer their students to the Writing Center once they write their first draft, and that require them to consult the Writing Center before they submit a second draft. So I would encourage you, if you're writing a paper in your first draft, make an appointment in the Writing Center. You mentioned the Black Ink. We've gotten so much, how can I say, interest in the Black Ink Project across the HBCU, across, in terms of writing curriculums across the country. It is one of the most unique, how can I say, design of a writing program where the foundation and the underlying is the Black life, history, and culture, so forth.
Okay, and my last question to you is, could you give us 3 books maybe that you want us to check out and read? Just 3 books that you want us to maybe go back and look over and look at before we end.
Wow. 2 things. I do a comparison. I like to do a comparison. So I mentioned Sula as one I read frequently, and also Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston. Okay. When it comes to Native Son, it is a similar text that, I think is so timeless and still relevant today. A third one is Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. There's hundreds, but in terms of the times now, there's one by Chester Himes called Plan B. And, there's novels. My favorite genre is the novels. There's 100 novels that, I could give you to read. And many of the Black novels you can read in 3 or 4 hours. But those, I would say, Sula, Their Eyes, Native Son, Invisible Man, contemporary. I'll be honest, I'm not abreast and up to date with the quote contemporary novels, but those I would recommend that you read.
Okay, Doc, and I'm going to allow you to get the final say. Anything that you want to conclude with, your final thoughts over everything?
Well, I was telling Mr. Green, this is a first experience for me, and I hope I presented some ideas that might be helpful to you. Like I said, just a little personal experience. As an English major, back in the day when you applied to college, you had to put a photo on it. And so they discouraged us from becoming English majors. So I say to students, my first 5 papers, I got D's and F's on them. And it was very discouraging. But this is where I'm saying, rewrite, keep writing, your writing will improve. And so I became an English major, right? My dissertation was on writing. So just keep writing, and that you have to become your own editor and proofreader, right? Have confidence if you know the grammar, if you know syntax, if you know the different characteristic of a particular mode of writing and what the structure of that writing, you become the person, become confident in terms of editing. English teachers are really high-paid editors, We mark up and grade your paper, but we want you to be able to read your paper and identify the interference in your paper of writing an excellent paper. So, become abreast knowledge of grammar, syntax, and the different types and different modes of writing. And, get in the habit of writing something daily, where you want to call it a journal, where you call it a diary. Get in the habit of writing, and also date the topics you write about, because you can look over a year from now and see what your thoughts were about it on February 25th. And a year from now, what are your thoughts about it, about the events that are happening in the world today, thoughts you've had about, your classes, the effects of being online, virtual education. Get in the habit of writing something each day, just like get in the habit of learning something about Black people each day and responding to it.
Well, Dr. Nathaniel Norman, thank you for a great presentation. You did a phenomenal job, sir, for your first time. I don't know if you said it was your first time. You did a great job. I took a lot from it. I hope all of our viewers took a lot from it. This has inspired me to become a way better writer, and I'm going to do a lot of more reading and writing. I'm going to take your advice. I'm going to take up a couple of those books you told me to read. I've actually checked out the writing lab twice so far this semester, and it's really good. So again, thank you, sir, for all of your knowledge and for all that you do for students, and for all that you do that you did today and inspiring us to be greater writers and readers. Again, thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Much
Yes,
love.
sir.
Thank you.
Much love to you. Again, thank you all for watching. Thank you all for tuning in tonight. We hope that this presentation has inspired you to be a better reader and a better writer. Stay tuned, stay up to date with the Morehouse Travel Assistance. We have a lot of phenomenal things and great things that are getting ready to come up. We pray that you all are safe, that you all are being great people. Again, we say thank you all for tuning in tonight. Much love to you all. We'll see you all soon.